Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I don't know how expanding government's reach and control over this great economic boom we've had with the Internet will somehow make it better. And I can't imagine that turning the Internet into a regulated utility somehow will unleash investment and job growth in a way that hasn't already occurred. In fact, I think it will precisely do the opposite. Commissioner Wheeler, I'd like to continue on your budget proposal. And I thought Chairman Crenshaw asked a very important question regarding what the priorities of the FCC are and where our dollars are being spent. And his question related to all the resources that were expended and an estimate maybe you could give regarding the resources expended to regulate the Internet like a common carrier over these past few years that result in the rulemaking. But I'd like to know, as we go forward, I think your statement was you expect lots of litigation. Excuse me, the big dogs to sue, I think was your quote at one point. Knowing of that litigation risk, do we know what that will cost the FCC, will cost the government? What are the future expenditures? Chairman Crenshaw asked about the past expenditures. I'm interested in the future expenditures, and will that fall under your pie chart here under unavoidable costs? What are those unavoidable costs to taxpayers?
Thank you, Mr. Yoder. We maintain a litigation staff at the agency because no matter what we decide on whatever issue, people turn around, as they have a right to, and ask the court to review it. That litigation staff is in place, and that is the litigation staff that would be used to handle things.
Commissioner Pai.
I do think that the litigation component is one part of the cost that will be involved, but I think there are also other important elements as well. The subsequent rulemakings, the FCC order tees up a number of other regulations that are going to have to be adopted, the adjudication of any complaints that are filed with the Commission, as well as any advisory opinions the Enforcement Bureau is called upon to render.
So if the FCC could at some point estimate what they think, and we might have different estimates of what this will cost, but we'd appreciate to know because we'll have to figure out a way to pay for the expense with implementing these rules in litigation. One of the other concerns I have heard from many relates to taxes that may go up related to the government's designation of the Internet as a regulated utility, therefore making it eligible to be taxed under the Universal Service Fund. And I would be interested to know, does the Commission intend to use its new powers to impose these USF fees on the Internet?
Well, as you know, Congressman, there's an exemption from making that decision. We did not make that decision in this order. There is underway a review of the contribution schedule for Universal Service Fund that is being done by both a committee of both state regulators and federal regulators, and they'll be giving us a recommendation. I think it is incorrect, however, to say that anything in what we have done will lead to an increase in universal fee contributions, because the amount of the fund is set by the agency, is not set by what happens in terms of a Title II determination. And that's the important thing to bear in mind, that number remains fixed, that number does not increase because of the fact that we have done a Title II reclassification.
So just so I understand your answer, the Commission hasn't decided whether to apply the USF taxes to the Internet.
And if it did, based on the Federal State Board recommendation, it would be not changing the numerator, but changing the denominator.
It would change who pays, for sure.
Which would have a negligible effect on consumers, if at all.
Well, at this point, those fees aren't being charged on Internet services, and they would be. Do you know what that total would be?
You would pay it, if I can, you would have a reduction in one area that may be accompanied by an increase in the other that should end up washing out because the gross number is the same.
Commissioner Pai.
I do think that the order explicitly opens the door to the imposition of universal service fund taxes, and the only thing the order assures the public is that those taxes won't increase on the date of the effective date of the order itself. But I do think the writing is on the wall with respect to the Universal Service Fund, given some of the promises the agency has made with respect to the programs that are administered under the Universal Fund, E-rate, for example. Secondly, also, it's important to remember that the reclassification of broadband as a telecommunications service itself triggers a number of other taxes, state and local property taxes, for example. Heretofore, unclassified broadband providers are now going to see a boost in their property taxes, which will have to be borne by the consumer. Additionally, there are a number of other fees that are going to have to increase. Pole attachment rates, for example, those too will be passed on. And so reclassification is sort of the first step down the hill, if you will, in terms of the tax rates that Americans pay for broadband.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would just ask if the FCC could somehow calculate the increase in costs and fees, local, state, and federal, that will be passed on to taxpayers and users, and be able to pass that on to the committee.
If I may, one independent study from the Progressive Policy Institute has put that figure at $11 billion per year.
Thank you.
And if I may, that specific one study was given 3 Pinocchios by the Washington Post.
Sounds like we'll have time to continue to discuss this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Yoder has another question.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to commend both of you on, I think, doing a very nice job today of laying out opposing viewpoints on an issue that is of critical importance to our country. And I think it's been nice to watch the interchange and debate, and I appreciate your testimony, both of you today. And you've articulated issues that I think has given both parties in this Congress things to think about on the other side. I will say that what continues to give me pause, and I think the net neutrality debate is a very interesting one, is the potential camel's nose in the tent regarding future regulation. And I think even Chairman Wheeler, you would be wary of the FCC expanding these powers, I hope. And so whatever the FCC can do, obviously I've raised the issue of taxes and the USF fund. I've raised the issue of the cost to implement. But the potential to expand and control rates and all of these things, I think, would make many of the proponents of this net neutrality proposal regret that the FCC took those actions to get there, because it could ultimately be a net loss in terms of freedom and opportunity here. So it's not just net neutrality. I think that debate's been very interesting. It's what else could happen. And we've seen agency after agency in this government take very limited powers and figure out ways to expand them. It happens at the EPA. It happens at every federal agency. And we wonder how the regulatory agencies end up getting away with all of this power, and they usually justify it by saying, well, someone gave us a broad power long ago, and we have the power to expand that within our own rules. And so I think Congress will really have to look at making sure that this expansion of power doesn't occur to some of these other potential problems that I think even proponents of net neutrality would be opposed to.